Lived experience not only shapes how people view a community, but also how they view themselves. The sum of these experiences and memories form a narrative about a community. It's at the intersection of this that we seek to explore how these experiences and memories shape individuals. How has their community motivated them? And perhaps how have they motivated their community? I'm Corey Sadlemyer, host of Motivation Local. Our focus this season will be my hometown, Medicine Hat, Alberta. Through a collection of stories, our goal will be to generate an informative sketch about Medicine Hat through the eyes of a small sample of its members. Some of our guests will be born and raised here, some will be former residents that have ventured off to new places, and some will be people who have come to call Medicine Hat home. Each will provide their own reflections on place and identity. Our hope is that this provides you with time to reflect on your hometown, wherever you live. In a story about place, I would be remiss to not acknowledge the land that inspires this show. This coulee-carved corridor that intersects what has become Treaty 7 and Treaty 4 land, a meeting place for the Blackfoot and the Cree for centuries, and the home of the Métis as well. Lastly, I would like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my role at Medicine Hat Public School Division. It is, however, about celebrating the community in which I live and work in, and as with any small community, there will be an intersection of guests and roles that reference my work with the school division. Our guest today is Jace Anderson. Jace is the Executive Director of Medicine Hat Tourism. Jace can be found promoting our community in a variety of ways: local food and restaurants, the variety of experiences you can take on in and around Medicine Hat, and celebrating our coffee culture. Jace is uniquely positioned to share his insights into Medicine Hat, both as a resident in our community and as someone whose job it is to have a pulse on what others think about us around the province and across Western Canada. We hope you enjoyed today's thoughtful and insightful discussion. All right. Well, I'm really glad that you said yes to the invite. I was thinking, like, when I went through my list of people to invite, of like all the thousands or tens of people that I know in Medicine Hat, yes. I thought your connection to tourism, being the executive director there for pretty much the last decade almost. Yeah, 11 years and a bit now, if we're counting. That you would have some special insights into Medicine Hat community, its identity, and perspective not only inside the community, but what people think of us from the outside. Yeah, absolutely. My wife came across an Instagram post from a Calgary realtor, and he was saying this is the image of your community or something. And so it was like in 3 parts, and they're showing all these cities around Alberta. And usually it was like a clip out of a movie. So like Cold Lake was like some airplanes and a couple Top Gun guys. And Medicine Hat was like this crazy looking artist dude. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I was going, like, I'm trying to, like, some of them are like, Olds was just an old guy. Like, I was going, okay, so it's just a play on words. But I'm going, what is this one? I can't.
I really like that. And it, we've got data to support that. Yeah, absolutely. So when I had the good fortune and opportunity to get involved in tourism in Medicine Hat at this current journey, the pre-work had been done. There had been some research done by the community committee that were looking to form a DMO, or destination marketing organization. Mm-hmm. And the research centered on 2 things primarily. It was, who do we as a community see ourselves as from a tourism or visitation lens? Mm-hmm. And who do visitors, at the time, I think the way the question was framed was, if you think of us at all, what do you think of when you think of us? And it was fascinating to read through that document, because what you just described is really one of those 2 brand pillars that we took the great big document and all the words and distilled it in essence to something that we could work with, something that we could sort of carry forward. And one of those brand pillars, I like to call them, was emerging culture and creativity. Mm-hmm. And it is easily defined when you point at things like Medelta and our live music scene and the arts in particular, for a community of our size, for a community with our history, we are not what you would expect. And it's because we have a higher concentration of these passions that locals celebrate, they lean into, it fills their soul.
Yeah.
And as that happens, the data tells us that then people further away, those concentric circles,
Right.
they start to see who we are from a personality or a tone perspective in that way. That's awesome that it would be as distilled as an Instagram post where a series of pictures and keywords and I mean, I almost want to think that I paid for that because that's so bang on.
I'm going to show, well, my phone is being used as one of the cameras right now, so I can't show you the post right now, but I do have it.
I'd love to see it because it's not one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
I assure you we didn't pay for it. That's not what we're doing. But when things like that happen and that sort of, it feels a bit sometimes like kismet or serendipity. These things line up. And for me, it's a reaffirmation that consistency matters, that doing something once or doing something a half a dozen times is a great start to a journey. But it doesn't have the impact or the longevity of doing something over time. And that matters in lots of different ways of our life. But it also matters in messaging and for visitors and locals, building that underlying sense of pride of place.
Do you think, I interviewed Luke Vandrick as part of this, and Luke's
remarkable individual. That's fantastic.
He's archived Medicine Hat for a long time, right?
Yes, he has.
And one of the things that he observed was that sometimes you don't see it when you're in it, right? So he'll go away and do some travel photography and come back and see things that he didn't see before. Do you think, like, even with that idea of what maybe some people in those concentric circles see of Medicine Hat, that maybe locals take that for granted or miss it to some extent?
100%. I'm guilty of it myself. I think it's certainly my human nature to end up with blinders on because I'm doing what I'm doing, thinking about what I'm thinking about, and I'm living in a rhythm. And, we can describe that as a rut sometimes, but it's a rhythm of repetition. And it's one of the beauties of travel, regardless of where we travel or when or how, the sort of the physical act and choice to take ourselves out of our day-to-day norm and to be in another place and then to come back. It does a few beautiful things for us or for our soul. And one of the things it does is it allows us to, in that moment as we return, we see it in a slightly different lens. And so in our role in tourism, one of the things we talk about is giving voice to that lens or that perspective of the visitor, because it's not that we're speaking to them all the time, although we do message to them, but we're speaking to ourselves collectively as a community about how someone else might perceive us. And so it's not a perfect mirror, but it gives us a sense of how they see us and can influence how we choose to present ourselves, or perhaps how we choose to act. The other thing that it does that I find just really rewarding is that it can inspire a renewed commitment or a frequency or activity around something that we're doing, but we might not know or see the value of it beyond, I enjoy this. And so whether that's mountain biking or painting or anything in between, we can be doing it because we love it. And then when we realize we're actually part of a community that's benefiting from and enjoying it, that can change how we approach it. And then, I get this sort of feedback from the mountain biking club or some other people in the community, when they recognize that they actually get in a day-to-day lived experience what others aspire to and want to experience. They look forward to traveling here so they can touch that moment. And we get it. We know that in places that we want to travel to, whether it's a mountain culture or the coast or whatever it is we might want to go. We go there and we get for a couple of days what someone who lives there gets all the time. But to your point, they forget naturally
Yeah.
why it matters for us to go fill our soul.
Yeah.
And so when we get to, as a community, Medicine Hat and Southeast Alberta, when we get reminded that people fill their soul spending some time here, that's pretty rewarding, because it's easy for us sometimes to think that that happens somewhere else, but it doesn't happen here.
Right. It's easy to forget about your hometown, right? And
it is.
Places that are there.
It is. That's probably consistent almost everywhere. But I think it's sort of accentuated sometimes in a rural, the land here was broken. Yeah. They broke the land to build homes. They broke the land to farm and to ranch and all of those sorts of things. And so there were very distinct choices. We, as a community, formed around the creation of a railroad and the tent town that was necessary to build a railway bridge across the South Saskatchewan. In the absence of that, there was no sign in the ground that said we would be a town.
Yeah.
And so when all of that happens, it happens by very clear intent. It's almost a transaction. And so we, for 125 years, have been having these transactions with the land and the community around us, to then, in that moment, now be reminded that separate to all of that transactional benefit as a community, this place inspires us, and the people around us inspire us. And to have other people choose to come because of that inspiration is beautiful.
And you, because I had made the assumption that you were from Medicine Hat originally, but you're a West Coast kid.
I am,
and you've got a whole background to appreciate that in a different way. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Medicine Hat of all places. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I love to tell people that I'm not born and raised in Alberta. I simply moved here the minute I was old enough to make my own decisions.
Right.
And so West Coast kid, grew up in the Cowichan Valley, primarily on Vancouver Island, Coetson territory. My first memory is probably James Bay, Victoria. So that's my first memory as a child. I rode a big wheel and I chased my hippie parents, and they were on roller skates. And so those are the first formative memories that I have. I'm probably dating or aging myself.
I had a green machine.
There it is. Absolutely. And that little e-brake, and you could
you spin around.
Oh, you could navigate corners that today I'm not sure I would do just by walking.
And we play smash up derbies with the big wheel guys.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, life well lived is what that was. And so that was my formative journey. My father ended up in forestry. And so as a sort of a family dynamic, it was a multi-generational home, and he chose to keep the family fire close. And as a family, we would move from town to town to follow work. So as opposed to the prevalent model at the time where the family would stay in one community and he would leave for weeks at a time, or, extended hours so that you'd never see him. He bundled the family up and we'd move for 8 months and move again for a year and a half. And so when high school was done, when it was time to look beyond the island and contemplate what a future might look like, Alberta was calling. And there were a handful of reasons why Alberta and Medicine Hat. I drove through all of Alberta on my introduction, but I came to Alberta to come to Medicine Hat. And I figured it'd be for a few years. And that was more than a few years ago. I fell in love with the place, with the people, and have been here ever since.
And what stood out to you when you first came here? And just thinking about that identity piece.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about pride of place, and so sometimes a local can diminish in their own mind where they're from, because it's utilitarian. Where I'm from is just where I live, but when I go places on vacation, it's something else. And so I got a fair bit of why would you leave the island and come to the prairies? And it was probably half in jest, being welcoming, but also it had a tinge of folks just sort of diminishing the value they put onto the perspective of the draw of a community that was on the cusp of a desert. And I said, that's actually some of the beauties and the strong suits. And so if you just compare the two, on the island in effectively what is a rainforest, it rains all the time. To rain, you need clouds. The rain grows trees. And so you could grow up looking at green trees and gray cloud and never see a blue sky for days and days and days. Fast forward, I come to Alberta and I can see blue sky for farther than my eyes can articulate. And 330 days of sunshine in Medicine Hat a year, it's open blue skies. And that's just a complete change in the spirit of being in a place. And so sometimes it's not better or worse, it's just different than the norm, which is part of why weekend travel is wonderful. You get to get out of your rut or your lane and go and do something and come back to it. Alberta did that for me, and I fell in love with it.
And that's that weekend travel piece. That's part of what you guys promote, right? That kind of hub and spoke approach, right?
It most definitely
there's
is.
Great things here, but there's a lot of really good things close by too, right?
Yeah, the southeast corner of this province is pretty remarkable, and it's just below the surface in some cases in that we're familiar with it as locals, and we might want to sort of hoard a little bit of it because we like the speed and the pace and the accessibility. But it is rich enough and large enough that we can share with some folks. And I love the fact that over the last 10 years, and over the last 5 years in particular, we've really seen some really positive wins and impacts of drawing demand and interest and seeing that. And one of the things that speaks to it for me is that depending on where you go, and you think about where you might like to go, where you might like to spend your time when you're not at home, sometimes there is a nature of it being not the norm, even where it is. And so I think about Disneyland or Disney World. Going there might be remarkable, although my story is simply that we drove past. It's another story entirely. We didn't actually stop the car.
That's cruel.
It was. And as a 4-year-old in particular, I learned very quickly that my father had a remarkable sense of humor. Son, look out the right side of the car as we're driving through California. I look. I said, yeah. He says, you know what that is? I said, no, Dad, I don't know what that is. He said, son, that's Disneyland. I said, Goofy? Mickey? He's like, yep. I said, are we going to stop? He said, nope. We drove right on by. Love that man today.
Yeah.
But a segue like that, and I completely am reminded how much I appreciate my father, but I completely lose where we were talking and where we were going.
The kind of the hub and spoke.
Thank you very much for that. It is the recognition that what we have here is remarkable, but it's unique. And so it doesn't have to be better or worse or simply different and at a different pace and scale. And the accessibility is part of what we have here. And so Medicine Hat serves as a hub and as a gateway, not only to the Canadian Badlands if you're driving north, or Highway 3, well into some beautiful regions on into BC if you turn to the west, but Cypress Hills and Rock Coulee and all of these different points and places that you get there from here, and each one is it provides something unique to itself, and that's where I was going with Disneyland. With Disneyland, it's not the norm even for the person who lives nearby. That's not the community. That's a particular thing they've done. Yeah. Whereas what we're seeing and what I'm enjoying, certainly in my role, is that visitors are coming to our region to do and participate and be engaged in the things that we as a community love. And so as a result, we don't have that same sense of overwhelming friction. It's not as though we can spot people who are tourists or spot people who don't live nearby. They just showed up to take advantage of our parks or our trails. We're out enjoying our 170 or 190 kilometers of trails in Medicine Hat, and somebody comes from Edmonton to do the same thing. They're not wearing a camera. They're not wearing a sun hat. It's not the prototypical leisure tourist, and so you can't tell. And I think that's beautiful because they're engaging and appreciating a community that we love in a way that really becomes part of why we either choose the community or why we stay.
And how, and maybe you don't know the answer to this question, how actively aware are people when they are creating these things? We could probably talk about things like Jazz Fest and like those kind of annual traditional events, but things like the walking trail, or even I know at some of the golf courses that through COVID, lots of people discovered Medicine Hat as a destination for that, and people started changing. Instead of going to Whitefish or to BC for a golf trip, they're coming to Medicine Hat for a golf trip. How actively aware do you think people are in knowing they have a role in creating those opportunities?
There's probably sort of a scale of maturation of when it tips to when they become aware. And that scale is probably different, or that journey or curve is different for everybody. There will be, without a doubt, the unicorn who says from the ground up, I'm doing this because of the visitor that will come and follow in the future. But I think back to authenticity. The majority of what we're talking about, the majority of what is putting Medicine Hat on people's maps has been done by locals with the intent of sharing it with their community for locals. And so whether it's Jazz Fest, that's 27 some years now, or the Tongue on the Post, which was originally Alberta's only winter folk festival, it draws people, and it sort of tells people who we are as a community, even if they don't come for those 5 days. The fact that we have it lets them understand and appreciate who they believe we would be as a community to do something like that effectively. And then as the process matures for each of these individual things, all of a sudden lights start to go off. And the trail network is a great example. The municipality, the city of Medicine Hat, is building trails for its residents. There's no question. And the residents in Medicine Hat love those trails. There's also no question about that. So now all of a sudden, as they continue to build out that suite of trails and people from out of town begin to come in for that, the city's fully aware now that that is what we would in the industry perhaps describe as a demand generator. It is something that would cause somebody to say, you know what, I'm driving past or through, and I travel with my bike. I'm going to stop. And I'm going to make an intentional trip. Or to your point about golf courses, particularly with the seasons we have, with the shoulders were dry and warmer earlier in the spring and later in the fall. And so those groups that you're describing are coming from all over Alberta and beyond, because just like mountain bikers aren't able to ride in the same weekends that they can here, because they're where they generally go. Still ice or slush or snow or whatever it is. And so the accessibility becomes really important. And that's awesome, because that's who we are. And sometimes as a community, we take that for granted. But it's a beautiful aspect to be able to share.
You guys, you mentioned this right off the hop, that you've done a ton of research, both internally to the community and externally. What are some of the things that people need to know?
Oh, wow.
That might be super broad.
How much time do we have? Yeah. I think one of the things that, and it's perhaps a prevalent theme in this conversation to this point, one of the things that can happen easily is we forget or discount or don't consider what it is about the community that might have inspired us in the past and might inspire somebody else in the future. And now we're not talking leisure tourism specifically, but it can be relocation, it can be investment attraction. All of these different things are in this same bundle. And that is that when we're living in our day-to-day, we become very familiar with the thin sliver of whatever it is we're doing. When someone's looking at a new community, either to travel to or perhaps to relocate to, and we know we're experiencing that right now for a number of really, really strong reasons, they're looking for the things that might have inspired us to come here originally. But over time, we forget those, right? And that's really encouraging. And so in that pre-brand pillar document development, we distilled that down to 2 brand pillars. One was that emerging culture and creativity. And I'm coming up on year 12 for me in this role, and the journey and the growth of the organization and what we've seen in the community has been wonderful. I'm wondering whether the word emerging still applies. I wonder if it's not emergent, or perhaps there's another word. But nonetheless, I didn't say irregardless, but I try to once a day say the word that doesn't exist, regardless. So there's that aspect of it. And I think that, in that space, the other brand pillar was the outdoor experience. And so even 12 years ago, when we didn't have this many trails and this much of a concerted intentionality around some of these things, it was recognized both by the locals and by the visitors that what we have here is unique, and it's accessible. And that becomes really, really valuable, really important. And so we as a community can see ourselves through those lenses. And the visitors do, whether we see it or not, visitors see it. Then when we start to layer on the very intriguing aspect around the food and drink, and it's not lost on me that absolutely everybody who travels also has to eat and drink.
Right.
And in fact, now we make a lot of decisions based around what we might eat or drink. Maybe not every decision, but there are actual brand segments of travelers who travel specifically for food.
Right.
Okay, I know that's not how I'm wired per se. When I arrive in a community, then I start to look around for something to eat that's local or unique. But I know people who they start to predict where they're going to go based on the pre-research of what they might eat or drink on those trips. And so we're able to pack that in a really exciting way. And so whether that's the sheer volume of independent coffee shops we have in our downtown, or the fact that as a city of this size, when breweries became a going concern in 2016, 2017, 2018, well, we have three. We have three active, wonderful, tasty beverages here in the community, and then a distillery. And so all of those things start to layer on top of, because when a traveler is traveling, a number of the segments we're talking about who aspire or are engaged by outdoor activities and emerging culture and creativity, they're looking for something local, something sourced locally in their food and their drink. And so our community does that well. We have this farm to fork connection and always have. It's in our DNA as an ag community. And so to be able to highlight that and present it, those things are great. And we don't always think about it in that way, just living here. I'll give you a really quick example. I'm driving home from work, so any day of the week, and I'll stop at one of the greenhouse huts somewhere. I'll go in, I'll drop $10 or $12 in loonies or toonies. And those are coins I keep in my car just for this trip.
Just for cucumbers and peppers.
I got to keep one coin just in case I go to a shopping center. But it's cucumbers, it's peppers, it's tomatoes. And I've been tricked into thinking that's what vegetables taste like. Because I've been somewhere else. And I thought, what I'm craving right now is a small bag of vegetables. And I go into a supermarket and I buy vegetables, and they kind of taste like cardboard. Right? And yet here in southern Alberta, we get this rich, abundant, flavorful experience. We can think that that's the norm. And yet I have a chef friend in Edmonton who, when he drives past, on his return, he stops and fills the trunk of his car with fresh vegetables, because it's not the same as getting them in a number of other communities. And this is a culinary, and so to know that, to share that, that's pretty cool.
I had my brother-in-law, they lived in Manhattan for a few years, and we started to send 7-person sausage to him in New York City.
Absolutely.
And you could sell it for like double. I'm going like,
it's true.
We could do a little import-export business here, right? Like,
It's true. It's true. I have friends in BC, and one in particular on Vancouver Island will occasionally send me a picture when he's eating a fresh salmon. And he's like, this is the benefit of living here, Jace. I'm like, I grew up there, I know. Yeah. But when you think about it intentionally, my response to him is a photograph of fresh vegetables. Like, there it is. Yeah. Right? There's no way that tastes the same anywhere else. And so we give and take. Yeah. But I think one of the beautiful things, the underlying all of this is, ideally in a perfect world, we feel we have agency and we choose where we live. I think that gives us a pride of place and a sense of place, as opposed to perhaps feeling as though we're trapped or wish we were somewhere else but are not. To really have the sense of agency that we want this, and those greenhouses in particular are a part of that for sure.
Well, and I saw you did a little thing with the news chat the other day.
Yes.
Yeah, and talking about the farm to fork.
Yes.
Thing, and so not only that being a medicine hat thing, but a way to connect with communities throughout Southern Alberta.
Yeah. So we've done a campaign called Savour the Southeast for probably 10 years. It started before me, but we've been driving that for 6 or 7 years at least. And the basic premise, it's really easy to replicate anywhere else in the world. The basic premise is we look for restaurant partners, restaurants, coffee shops, et cetera, who will commit to featuring a locally sourced menu item and celebrating it on their menu. We started with a week. The restaurants came back and said, could we do this for 2 weeks? A couple of years later, they came back and said, could we go 3 weeks? We did, because the sort of the secret strategy behind it for me was always, let's help the restaurants and the producers connect and understand how simple it is so that they could do it all year round. And they could have a menu that changes with the seasons, that becomes seasonally focused, and a menu that is just steeped with locally sourced food and drink. Because that's what people are going to remember. Yeah. That's what they're going to talk about. And that's what they're going to seek out. And our partners should benefit from that. This year, we launched, with the support of Travel Alberta and a number of other partners, Savour Alberta South. And so we've taken that model, we've grown it, and we have some really intriguing things we're going to do in 2025 to build on the campaign. But we stretched that down Highway 3, all the way through Tabor and Lethbridge, Fort Macleod, all the way to the South Canadian Rockies, which is Crow's Nest Pass.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's delicious and it tastes well. Yeah, absolutely.
And an excuse to stop at a lot of cool places. What I was looking through the guides that you guys have on the website and stuff, and what role does storytelling play in the work that storytelling play in your work?
Yeah, probably, even if I said 100%, it's probably more than that. We are not the arbiter of all knowledge. Tourism industry 30, 40 years ago was prefaced on the fact that they could control information and they would share and promote what they wanted, and what they didn't share or promote wasn't out there. Fast forward the world we live in, people have access to knowledge. They have access to raw information with or without us. And so our, I think, strategic goal in that is to be really intentional and forthright in how we aggregate information and share it for particular segments of locals and potential visitors. In doing that in a way that they don't feel bombarded, because another series of ads and another thing they have to engage with is easier and easier today to just ignore, isn't it? Yeah. And so if we can do something that instead compels people to want to know a little bit more, and that sometimes, in my mind, I think about the sort of the visual of a string, and you're slowly pulling a string because you want to see where the string goes or where it's coming from. The handkerchief out of the pocket for the magician, whatever that is. And the other one that in my mind plays is the little bits of cheese that you might follow. And so you're following intent on the prize and giving less thought to where your environment might be, because you're going for this. You're being led down a path. And it's an opportunity for us to recognize, first of all, what is it that our community does that they are passionate about? And you've identified some of the things already, whether it's live music or the arts or the trail and outdoor experience, golf and the river valley, et cetera. What in that are the community just aspiring to? What do they love to participate in? Now, can that be the string or the handkerchief, as opposed to trying to manufacture a draw? Let's find and reach the people who are drawn the same way we are to the aspects of this community. And so narrative and storytelling, featuring people more so than information. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We can see a photograph of a stage and think that's probably a great venue for live music. Right. We can see a photograph of a live act. So, oh, those are live musicians. Right. Layer on some people in the audience, and now I start to have an emotional response to the picture.
Myself.
I can picture myself there. Perfect. And then start to create a pathway for people to then get more information and potentially visit. It all starts with a visit, whether it's relocation or investment attraction or otherwise. All of those people are going to look at the community first and then drive in at some point or fly in at some point. And so we just want to really, really intentional about the fact that we don't talk about having something for everyone, although we might. We don't talk about the fact that there's 150 things you can do in Medicine Hat, although there's at least that. Yeah. We talk about very specific things that we believe are reaching segments that are open to that, because then they engage and participate. Yeah. And that's, I think, storytelling is brand building. Yeah. It's destination conversation as opposed to advertising, which is historically what tourism people would do, is advertise their destination. Yeah. That has value and merit in place, but it doesn't occupy the majority of my time.
Yeah, is there, well, maybe this isn't I said this before, this might be a hard question to answer.
Those are my favorites.
In that magic hat or pulling the scarf out or the string, is there something you see as being untapped, or a secret that Medicine Hat is keeping to itself? Because I'm guessing in your role you would say, no, I'm going to go tell that secret.
Yeah. That's a great question, and the way you just framed it, it's not a secret, but there are stories that are frankly probably not mine to tell. And so we have some incredible Indigenous history in our region that goes back hundreds and thousands of years. And there are elements to that our team is, I believe our community is very excited about seeing grow in awareness and in conversation, because that, if and when that is, like I'd said before, genuine for us as a community, then it becomes something that I can assist through our network and efforts to lift and elevate and invite people from outside to engage and participate. Yeah. But what we're always cognizant of is that we don't want to invite people to something that the locals aren't doing, because then we have to manufacture what it feels like, and that we lose the claim of authenticity if we're opening a Disneyland.
Yeah, and that, well, we've with the school system, we've had the Geese Came a Win event.
Yes,
for the last couple of
years. It's a beautiful thing.
The sunshine trolleys have been super helpful in that, because elders have been able to go to take kids to Saratoga Park and do walking tours, and at the TP as well, and the kind of archaeological site that sits below that. That, like, even in my short time working with that group, I've learned so much, but I fully get that part, that it isn't my story to tell. Is for any of those kinds of situations, how do those groups leverage your resources?
So we have strong ties with Travel Alberta, which is the provincial Crown Corporation. We have a strong and growing relationship with Indigenous Tourism Alberta, which is new in the last 5 or 7 years. But one of the things we've done very intentionally is build relationship with stakeholders and partners in the community across a number of different communities. And the Indigenous elder community, the opportunity that we have to understand what they're working on and understand what they're passionate about, what their goals and objectives are, and be available to provide support, whether that's a TP or, the trolley for the events that you're describing. It's just us being open-handed and understanding that it's not my role to tell anybody else what to do, right? We, in my organization or out, it's my role to find alignment and to sort of recognize serendipity and build on it. And so with whether it's teams and communities within the City of Medicine Hat as a bureaucracy, or with our Indigenous elders in the community, it's understanding and being open to help them get where they're going. I've heard it described as leading from behind. And it may be, it may not be, depending on the time or the instance. But what it absolutely is being engaged and seeking to understand and create an environment where they can get their win without feeling like I or anyone else are pushing them towards it. Right. And I would do the same thing. But I do strive to provide that style of relationship building with everybody that we partner with and everybody that we have the capacity to support in our limited means. And so what that means for me is that we seek to bring value first, whereas it's easy to seek to be compensated first. Right? I need to sell you something so that we can work together. And that's commerce, and I'm not suggesting it's wrong. But we're afforded a very specific and really appreciated opportunity to, instead of needing to secure the cash flow funding cycle, we can come to the table with value, and we can offer that in support. And that allows us to be community-minded and partner-minded in ways that have helped us to become part of the community without extracting.
Right. Yeah. It's not transactional. Right?
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. What I find, and this is maybe a sort of an impersonal philosophy that predates my work in tourism, but when I have the opportunity to provide value, the benefit of that experience far outweighs me withholding that value until somebody pays me for it. And I'm not discounting that food needs to be bought and shelter needs to be paid for. So I'm not suggesting, but nonetheless, as a philosophy, when we can give first and then ask for partnership in return after, without that being a prerequisite to the gift, without acting as though if I give you this, you're going to have to help me here, but just give. When that works for you, you'll take my call next time. And if there is in the future a time when I do need help, then I'm asking a friend and not cold calling for an emergency.
And that mindset can be pervasive. Like I think about what I thought about land acknowledgements when I first started doing that, and how I think of that now.
Yes.
That I actually just want to acknowledge the land because that's what's going on here. Right?
That's right.
And how that can change my whole appreciation for what it is I'm trying to do when I do that, and change how others are viewing that. I was listening to Jesse Wente. It was at a conference that I was at, and he talked about it's 7 generations that have led to where we are.
Yes,
and the notion that truth and reconciliation is like something you can snap your fingers at and fix or change, or it isn't going to happen, and it's going to take 7 generations to work it back to some form of balance. And his analogy for that was, and I'm trying to connect this, is that mindset that you are in a canyon, and you are living right now in the echoes 7 generations behind you. And your job is to produce the echoes for the 7 generations ahead. And it's through everyday interactions and responses and how you treat people and all of those things. And living in what essentially is a settler community is, I think sometimes, I found initially trickier in figuring that out. But there certainly are ways that we can accomplish that here.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love the visual of the canyon and the echoes, because it reminds us that often what we're doing, even in our day-to-day, is we're modeling for the future. We're either modeling for ourselves or we're modeling for someone else who's paying close attention. That might be our children, for example. And so then all of a sudden, if we can appreciate that the decisions we're making, the actions that we're taking, aren't simply for the immediate transactional moment, but there is this legacy, if there's not a better word, that's really encouraging. The other thing that it speaks to for me is, and going back a number of years, I had the very good fortune of doing some travel and some work in East Africa. And when I was gearing up for that, I was certainly in a transactional mindset. I was going to go over, I was going to negotiate these things, we're going to do these things, have these outcomes, et cetera. And someone who had brought me into that planning for those trips pulled me aside and said, Jace, the first thing you're going to do is go and know and be known. So when they invite you to sit down and have a cup of tea, and they just want to talk about your family, don't short circuit that and jump to the fact that you want to talk about travel arrangements. Just be present. Take that moment and just give that, because that's what they're telling you they need to build the trust that I was prepared to forego just to get the result I thought I was being asked to deliver. And that's, I think, to the 7 generations, it is not simply this moment. And so take a deep breath and allow it to happen and be present, because it's not all going to happen in a day anyway.
Well, that probably, that connects up all the way back to what you were talking about from the start, that authenticity piece, right?
Yeah.
That, building the brand of an emerging or emergent community probably has to be built on authentic pieces.
It has to be. And I believe that fundamentally. And it's the authenticity that allows us to be consistent. If we were manufacturing it, then we would run the risk of changing it. We might be seeking, new and exciting or otherwise. Instead, if we can allow ourselves to interpret the environment around us through this lens of authenticity, it feels better, feels more real.
And have there been, looking at it with that lens, have there been some false starts?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You want a list of all the things I haven't done well? I can do that. You do not have enough time. But I'll say this. Frames, I think, for me, how I naturally position activity. And so and the best way I'll give is this. 10 years ago, I didn't say, this is the first of 10 annual events. Right. Because if the community doesn't want the event, then just forcing it for a visitor is not going to be authentic. And so instead, what my interest, or where my interest lies, is to do a thing and see what happens. If the community embraces it, if the community sees themselves in it, if that's working, then we could do that thing again. The dinner in the Kiln is a great example. It's a chef dinner, plated experience. 48 people come together and have this incredible meal. Handful of half a dozen chefs or so are participating. We didn't say we're going to do this for 5 years and we're going to hit this level of success and we're going to sell 800 tickets. We didn't do the things. Instead, we just did a dinner. Now, in the back of my mind, we were charting a course. But the minute we publicly state that, it changes the lens. And whereas if they were building a city 100 years ago based on exactly what it would look like in 2025, they might have done things differently.
Yeah.
They might not have done things that served the community in 1940 or 1960. And they might have done things that just arrested development out of sheer decision fatigue or panic or otherwise. Doing something well can be terrifying if you have to do it as good as it's ever been done right now, because you're going to do it like this way forever. Again, it's not rocket science, but
do you find medicine hat people to be open to that kind of ideation and let's give this a try and see what happens? Yeah,
I really do. I mean, if it felt like I was fighting against the community culture all the time, then I would either need to mature and change or just appreciate that maybe I'm not the guy.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just the opposite, I've found, and it's Kaizen, or continuous improvement of everything by everyone all the time. And I butcher that quote, but it's central because it allows us to say, we're going to do this thing. We're going to learn some things in the doing. And then when we go to do the next thing, it might look very much like this, but it might not. And that's okay. We're not judging and valuing ourselves based on our ability to deliver something 5 times over 2 years, because that's not what we're asking of ourselves. We want to see the community grow in a number of these different spaces, and this is how we've managed to do it.
And it kind of gives, gives other people the impetus or the ability to go out and try some of those risks themselves.
Yeah, we take some risk on as a DMO or a tourism organization because that's part of our nature. We can. One of the things we talk about all the time when we're introducing team members or in the community, to your point, is when something happens that we can collectively see our fingerprints in the outcome, our fingerprints in the work, it just means that much more to everybody. Whereas if folks were sitting around doing what Jace wanted, that gets old fast.
Yeah.
I might celebrate the fact that I got everything I wanted, and that would be a pretty hollow celebration because a year or two down the road, I'm sure folks are looking for someone else because who cares about that? Yeah. But if we can support and foster an environment where people are getting, and one individual may or may not be getting what they want, but as a community, we can see activation in these spaces that matter from a local generative visitor perspective, right? These brand pillars, if we can see activation in those spaces, then that's what we're doing.
What's next for Medicine Hat?
That's a great question. I have numerous times reminded council and others in the past that for a city of this size, my hope for the future is that we have a growing, thriving downtown hotel. I think we have an absolutely beautiful historic downtown. I think it does some remarkable things well, and I think there's some beautiful opportunity for the future. And I think one of those opportunities is for the traveler, the visitor, to be able to come into town and then stay and walk for a meal, for a show, and just to be able to do all of that in the downtown, as you or I might when we travel to other places.
Yeah, bring a bike along and
absolutely
hop on the trail, or the downtown conundrum. It's not a Medicine Hat thing necessarily, right? If you go to Lethbridge, you go to any of those communities, it's a tough problem to solve, and you can see moments like Midnight Madness where everybody floods down there and everybody talks about it the next day. That time kind of stands still because you're bumping into people and the snow's coming down. And,
the vibrancy was remarkable that night in particular.
And how do you capture that more often?
Yeah, it is consistency, and it is just being genuine and leaning in. There are significantly smarter people than me working on that city center conundrum, as you describe, and it's not unique to us here or Alberta or otherwise. And I mean, we need to find, we're talking about our friends or neighbors, we're talking about family members. We need to find some solutions that stick, not only for us, that'll help us feel better, because I think sometimes that's where it feels like we're leaning, but to help and support the people that are in those spaces. But outside or in addition to or around all of that, it is a matter, like you said, of committing to, from time to time, being present. And it's in those moments that we can really enjoy the city center, and it's happening. It's happening. It's a beautiful journey and trajectory. We look at, how some of these things might have felt 5 or 7 years ago to how they feel now. Yeah, we're on the right path.
I've visited some other, it's not a community, but New York, Stone Street, and it's and even Times Square, which is just a hot mess. But when they took vehicles out, and they made that area for pedestrians, and that's been, for me, when I've gone downtown and they've say closed 2nd Street for the evening or whatever that is, that's been my favorite time to be down in those spaces.
Absolutely.
But that is a risk.
Yeah, well, I will. I'm sure I'm nobody's favorite for saying this, but I just recently, 3rd Street was under a significant amount of redevelopment over the summer, and that was really hard for the community, for the business owners downtown. But one of the things that I really appreciated at the end when they opened 3rd Street up is that 3rd Street, 6th Avenue intersection was 4-way stop. They hadn't put the lights back up. And I just, in that moment, I thought, what a simple fix. It just slows everything down a little bit, and it allows people to be engaging, and I thought it was a beautiful solution. So, of course, as progress does, the lights are back up, and now we're at a light until it turns green, and then we race through, and all of these things are back to normal. So that's probably the best place. But I loved the pace. Having said all of that, Midnight Madness a number of years ago, 2nd Street was closed entirely to vehicles, which to me meant, or I interpreted it to mean, that I could just walk off a sidewalk onto a street, as you might think you could. I was standing in front of the Monarch Theatre, and it was dusk, and so it's a little dark, and I was looking in one direction, and I might have been talking to somebody, and I just stepped off the sidewalk onto the street to cross the street, and I heard the whinny of horses and the stomping of hooves and the brakes and the lurch. I stepped in front of a Christmas wagon and just about got run over, like somebody might have in 1883 when the city was forming. It was that close.
I bet you that had happened there before, but not for about 100 years.
Absolutely. Well, this is 7 generations. I was just looking to reconnect with our forefathers, as one does.
Yeah. Well, I wondered, like some of those things I just wanted to cover, talked a little bit about the Farm to Fork, and that came out of the Savour the Southeast, and there's the Ale Trail. Are there other promotional kind of concepts like that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, the Ale Trail, the Highway 3 Ale Trail was really exciting for us, because when we launched it a number of years ago, we launched it from Medicine Hat, and we wanted to connect to the breweries in the Crow's Nest Pass, South Canadian Rockies. And we have 3 here, there's 2 there. In the years that followed, we tapped so now we have all 8 breweries from one side of the province to the other along that highway corridor. And it's because we wanted to connect to the BC side of Highway 3. And Destination BC has done a really intentional job of marketing their side of that highway well. And it was time for us. And so we're at that gateway of Highway 3. So I took it upon ourselves to lean into that. It draws local pride of place. It connects people to what's being produced in their community. And then it creates an opportunity for us collectively to market the region at greater distance. And so when I'm marketing Medicine Hat in Alberta or in Saskatchewan, there's no disconnect. But if I'm marketing Medicine Hat further afield into the States and some markets, or further east, there's a diminishing number of things they know about us. And so there's more work we need to do, and that work comes with time and money. It's capacity to get them to the point where they say, yes, Medicine Hat. There's some work involved there. Yeah. When we lift Southern Alberta, Highway 3, in some of those same markets, they get it quicker. They understand because we're able to lean on and stand on the shoulders of all the work we've done, not just in Medicine Hat, but in Lethbridge and in the Rockies and all the way across. And so we can sort of get farther together than we can on our own. And that becomes, I think, a real strong pathway for us in particular, because there's some distance between us and major urban centers. In Medicine Hat, we're at distance. Yeah. But when we start to connect with our regional partners really intentionally, and we start to increase the scope of the shared messaging, then it's not us presenting competing messages. We're not both trying to outmaneuver one another. We're both lifting that Highway 3.
Don't come. It's not just come to Lethbridge. Come to Lethbridge and Medicine Hat.
Absolutely.
The other way around.
Absolutely.
But what impact do you think the twinning of the highway will have?
I look forward to when it's done. Just from someone who drives it on a regular basis, I think it's going to be an absolute gift. It's exciting to see some of that work underway.
It's amazing how I think this fall with the weather, how much further they got than.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to see it now, because it's a conversation that in our community has been happening for some time. To see it actually kicking off in the ways that we've seen it in the last year or so is really encouraging. Anytime you make travel on these roadways slightly smoother, easier, if it feels a little bit risk-free in comparison.
Not behind a beat truck.
Right, then all of a sudden it's easier to say yes. Yeah. Okay, and so we know we're getting that. And so one of the reasons why I love having our visitor information center on the Trans-Canada Highway where it is we have this opportunity to capture international travelers when they're driving through. And we get a lot of folks driving through. And it's remarkable how many of them are driving through from the States, Eastern Seaboard. Yeah. They're driving through and they don't have a tight agenda. It's not like how I would plan a trip, perhaps, where it's like Thursday I got to be there, Friday I got to be there. I've already booked the hotel room. We got to get there. These folks are traveling and they're just like, I got 4 weeks. I'm going to Alaska and coming back. It's a pilgrimage. It's a lived experience for them. And so when we see them and have a conversation across a counter and find out that they like craft beer, they like farm to fork, locally sourced food, they want to eat something local, those sorts of things. And I can point them down Highway 3. The pace is different. Yeah. And I can connect them to the producers and the businesses that we know. The number of people who say yes, thank you, and drive off in that direction is really rewarding. Yeah. In the absence of us doing that, what we're doing is we're leaving travelers to just make decisions based on the information they can find. Yeah. And like we said earlier, they can find all information, but I don't have all information. I stop. When I'm looking for information, I get to the point where I've got enough and I stop. Yeah. And so as a marketer, as a destination builder, one of the things I want to do is have enough of our information in that decision set before they decide to stop, that we have a fighting chance. Because if we just leave it to them and Google to solve, and they Google Alberta, they're going to find the Rockies, and for good reason. Yeah. But we have this value proposition that's really exciting, and we love to sell it.
Yeah. Well, I've really appreciated this conversation. We met ahead of time and chatted a little bit, and I've learned lots then, and I've learned even more now. And
thank you.
And I think this paints a whole neat picture of our town.
Oh, I appreciate that. I also enjoyed our coffee, and I'm enjoying the water now. I transitioned from coffee to water at some point during the day, so this was perfect. I guess one of the questions I was having when I was rolling up today was whether or not we were going to try and recreate the conversation we had over coffee, and I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad we were able to find these talking points, but then unpack them in an authentic way. Yeah. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, that was fun. Motivation Local is produced by Table 4 Productions with the generous support of TELUS Story Hive. You can find our episodes on Optic TV, at our website, motivationlocal.com, on our YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer is Turner Sadlemyer. Our theme music was composed by Medicine musical artist Snakes and the Riot. As always, thanks for watching or listening to our podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard here, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel or to leave us some feedback.